Hi everyone, my name is Tim Maria, host of Informed Health 2016 here at UCSF in San Francisco. We have Joshua McFarland, who's the Senior Director of Product at Twitter. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you have an interesting background in big data and in product development, but what brings you to the conference here in product development in Twitter?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So as Iron and I were thinking about this panel and as she sort of pitched it to me and the inspiration behind it, the big idea was there's so many applications of big data, and quite frankly, we all can learn from each other. So what would it look like if you got people from disparate industries, unrelated to healthcare, and brought them on stage and had a conversation about the ways that we use data and the different things that we've learned and the different ways that we've transformed our industries. For example, retail, which is what my company worked on before we were acquired by Twitter, and now Twitter helping to transform the way the world talks at large.
It's interesting, like with semantic analysis and geo-targeted tweets and things like that, we can actually see like influenza outbreaks or dengue fever outbreaks or different types of things. What are you guys learning in moving towards in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I shared on stage that's really interesting is the use of what's called the hashtag. And so you may have seen these in sort of popular culture references, but hashtag is basically the pound sign, right? Like the pound sign on your keyboard, followed by a very short, pithy description of whatever's happening right now. And the interesting thing about that is it's a way for humans to help filter unstructured data and make it more structured, but doing so in a very fun way that's part of the culture that we all participate in. And so you find these momentous events that will end up having a hashtag associated with them. And on Twitter, anytime you write a little statement or offer up a video or a picture and you add that hashtag, it's a way of the whole world collecting data and images and videos and sounds around an occasion that's happening in a very structured way, even though the input doesn't have to be terribly heavy. It's a really fun thing that I think everyone can learn from.
Who was all inside on the panel, and what were some of the hot topics that were being passed around? What were you guys discussing?
Yeah, so Matt, the gentleman from Cisco, was talking about the ability to use data to help with crowd management in stadiums, right? And Bob, the gentleman from Intel, talked about his early days in one of the first formative hedge funds and how he was able to use what at the time was big data. It was only a couple of gigabytes back in the early 90s, but the time was big data to sort of help make predictions in the futures market. And so you look at this and you say, what can I learn from each of those different instances, and what can I pull from my own industry? And I think a lot of what we've found at Twitter is the ability to harness what commonly is called machine learning or artificial intelligence, which is, it's a very fancy way of saying, how do you recognize patterns? How do you train software to recognize patterns? And that's exactly the type of thing that can be used for healthcare when you're looking at structured or unstructured data that's flowing in from patients and the things that they're saying, for example, on social media like Twitter.
Yeah, it's interesting is the digital health space really needs to have people with outside perceptions and talents in informatics, in AI, in pattern recognition, and image recognition, all these different things kind of coming together.
Yeah, that's right.
So what excites you about this digital health space and informatics and information at the point of care?
You know, the thing that excites me, quite honestly, is, I'll call it evolution. The fact that this industry is finally, in many cases, evolving to the point where it's catching up to a lot of what we've done in the commercial world. And that's great because the healthcare space is able to bypass a lot of the early rough years of handling data. Like, we figured all that out, right? We've got the big data infrastructure in place, and now it's just a matter of evolving the industry to a point that it can actually harness all this technology that we've built. But it's almost a benefit that you're able to skip over all of those early formative years. I think about it as like, I lived in India for about 6 months in 2005, helping to start Google's development office out there, our computer programming office. And one of the things that fascinated me is that India had basically leapfrogged the need for landlines, for physical phone lines, because they went straight to cell phones, right? And it was such a more efficient infrastructure that worked much, much better and brought India much, much faster into parity in terms of SMS at the time with more developed nations.
It's interesting, and that it really, especially with cell phones, the infrastructure becoming cheaper, satellites are going up, ubiquitous bandwidth, that'll change the whole game worldwide. So advancements can rapidly flow, just like tweets can be around the world in a second. So what's next up for you, and what are you trying to get out of the conference personally and with Twitter?
So for me, look, I think we're all very invested in the progression of healthcare and healthcare services because at some point in our lives, we're going to be consumers of those, right? And so being able to give to a community like this and offer what I can by way of proxy and examples is just important to me personally. And it's just been fun networking with people outside of my normal industry.
Yeah, you never know who you're going to meet. There's great people here. Well, Josh, we want to thank you, but how do people connect up with you? And of course, what's your Twitter account?
Right. So of course you can find me on Twitter. It's a little unconventional. It's at CrazyFoo. So that's Crazy FOO, which is an old nickname. We won't go into that right now. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. I'm there.
All right. Well, you sound like a fascinating guy. I'm going to catch you for lunch, and thanks for being on the show.
All right. Thanks for having me here.